I'm Colin Walls, and I'm here once again to talk about embedded software. Today I want to talk about the idea of licensing, of reusing software. Not a new idea, but I want to consider certain specific aspects of it that embedded developers at least need to think about. Now, when you buy software generally, you buy applications for your computer or for your phone or whatever, you simply get a binary image, you execute it on the device, and all is fine. The software does what it's supposed to do to a lesser or greater extent. Now, we can reuse software for developing embedded systems as well. We can purchase or license IP, intellectual property, of different kinds. And a really good example, and the one I use for the purposes of this discussion, is a real-time operating system. There are a number of companies that will license you an RTOS, and they'll do it in various ways, different licensing models, and you need to choose the one that fits your needs, both commercially and technically. Now, one aspect of licensing software which is discussed widely is the availability of source code. Now, when you buy applications for a computer and so forth, you don't get source code normally. You might do if you buy an open source product, but generally users of software don't need the source code, so they don't bother with it. However, in the case of embedded software, we want to integrate it in with the rest of our application, so it might seem sensible to have the source code, even though, for the most part, it could be provided in a binary form. If it was in a binary form, then of course it would be a black box. You'd have to just trust that it does what it does. Now, there's several reasons why people like to have the source code available, and these include education, so learning about how the code works. If you've got the source code, you can find out how the RTOS works. Technical support. Well, the vendor should provide technical support, but having the source code means you can have a little look yourself and figure out what's going wrong if you have a problem. Customization is a possibility. You could take your RTOS and modify it to fit your needs a bit better, perhaps. That's an option you would have. The last one is certification. If you are creating a certified application because it's safety critical or security is a requirement, you probably need the source code to go through the certification process. So that's quite a strong reason for having the source code available. I would like to suggest, though, there are downsides of having it available, and those downsides do need to be considered quite carefully. Firstly, if you've got the source code, you might be tempted to look at that instead of using the manuals, and ideally, this won't always be the case, but ideally the vendor's manuals be the best source of information about how the RTOS operates, and that's what you should be concerned about. In terms of looking at the source code, understanding how an RTOS works internally is quite a specialist skill. Can you really afford the time and effort? Do you want your team using up resources, learning how an RTOS works when you've paid money to license the thing? Why would you want to actually understand it in detail if it does what it's supposed to do? So why is a black box bad? I mean, to my mind, a black box is fine. Electronics engineers use integrated circuits all the time. They read the data sheet, they figure out what the chip does, and then they expect it to do what it says it will do on the data sheet. And why don't we assume the same with software? That's an interesting question. Last thing, customization. If you customize some software you've got, you might make it better for your needs. But what you're also in big danger of doing is creating multiple versions. And that is a long-term maintenance problem. If you can't access the source code, then you don't have that opportunity. You're using a more standardized product, and that's better for long-term maintenance. It's very important. What I would suggest, though, is having source code there is pretty nice. I can understand why it gives an engineer a feeling of comfort to know the source code is available. Perhaps just for emergencies. So maybe the management of the team should lock the source code away somewhere. Everybody knows it's there if you need it, but only if you really need it. So that's my thoughts on source code. If your vendor supplies it free of charge, that's great. If they want to charge you for it, you have to decide whether you want to pay that money, so long as they're upfront about it. One tiny warning. There is at least one software vendor who supplies source code for their real-time operating system, and they don't hide the fact that they scramble the source code. The source code is not human readable at all, which the reason they supply it in source code is it's easy to build and easy to configure from source code, but they don't want to expose their IP to other people, so they hide it. Now, scrambled source code just means having all the unnecessary white space and comments and stuff like that removed, so that the code is valid from a compiler's point of view, but the human reader can't make any sense of it. So be wary of that. So supply of source code, what you really are looking for is a supplier of readable source code. And with that thought, that's it, and I will say bye for now.